Why did Johnny Carson live his final years staying completely alone? He was America's king of late-night TV, loved by millions of people. In 199,250 million people watched his last show. But after that final show, he just disappeared. No interviews, no comebacks, and almost no times he was seen in public. So why did the most famous man on TV disappear and live completely alone? That's the mystery we're about to solve. When Johnny died on January 23, 2005, there was no public funeral held for him. From the 1980s until he died in 2005, Johnny Carson lived in his Malibu beach house. He saw fewer than 20 people each year outside the people living in his house. You might wonder how this was possible since Johnny was the host of NBC's The Tonight Show from 1962 to 1992. That's 30 years of always being seen by the public. How could he make sure that he didn't see many people, especially during that time? Johnny talked to over 7,000 guests and had done about 4,531 shows. No wonder Johnny Carson became the most famous face on TV in that time. People said he was super charming and funny. But not many people knew this. That wasn't the real Johnny. Or was it? His producer, Peter LaSalle, noticed something strange. He realized Johnny was wearing a mask of being a charming person who loved people. Peter saw Johnny switch from being an energetic, charming man to saying boring sentences while missing his couch at home. To Johnny, being a TV host was just a job he had to do. And there was a reason for this, which we'll soon tell you. So, whenever the cameras stopped filming, Johnny was already looking for ways to avoid people and leave the studio, small talk with others. He didn't even want to talk to any of the workers or even the people he worked with. Johnny would rather be Alanito in crossword puzzles than do that. What about talking to fans? That was a long shot. Johnny was so determined to avoid people that he told NBC to make his own private exit door for him. He would come back each night, but the rowdiness stayed the same. There were times that this routine got messed up, like when he got invitations to Hollywood parties. Johnny treated those parties as if they were terrible chores. He avoided them when heckled and when he couldn't didn't want to go. In a year, Johnny would only go to around 12 Hollywood events while his competitor Merv Griffin went to around 45 or more each year. Johnny had an excuse for not going to those Hollywood events. He would say parties are for people who love crowds and he wanted to go home to talk to his dog, not his wife. What a man! Could this be their son why Johnny had for marriages? Was he ignoring what the woman he married needed before he left the public eye and after? His routine was simple. He would play tennis by himself or read Space magazines alone. In the afternoon, he would have short phone calls to Jay Leno for sharing jokes. Their talks were controlled and about work. Even when got visitors like director Howard Smith, they would have a small chat where Johnny asked them to stay quiet and look at the stars. Smith said Johnny was happy, but was that happiness or was Johnny's past still bothering him during the last days of his life? What is Johnny's past? You'll see what way means soon. In the evenings, Johnny always ate at home, but it wasn't like didn't get invitations for dinner outside his home. His fourth wife, Alexis Mass, said they had quiet dinners with no guests unless it was family. She said Johnny loved that silence. Did he really, or was he being selfish? Instead of talking to her, Johnny would rather read, play tennis alone, or just watch the ocean. Johnny was too focused on himself and not what his wife and people around him needed. But Johnny also was a kind man. He secretly and without telling anyone wrote out millions of dollars in checks to help people and charities. However, how could this same man barely give his wife attention? But it wasn't just the woman he married he did this to. As you'll see, it isn't really surprising that Johnny turned out this way. When he was young, he wasn't like other kids. While neighborhood children played baseball and chased each other through Iowa corn farms, he stayed inside reading comics or practicing card tricks from a magic kit he begged for. At age 14, he usually felt his stomach hurt with fear before talking to people. It was so bad that when guests came to visit, he would hide behind his family's tall piano. Sometimes he would hide in the house and shuffle playing cards, all to avoid guests. He had to because if he got to noticed and wasn't perfect, heckled get in trouble. His mother, Ruth, wanted perfection from him and his brothers and sisters. However, she didn't think Johnny would be able to do anything close to perfect. Imagine making a child feel like they can't be good enough. She invented as a boy Johnny would always be dirty and she didn't like dirt. Imagine it that. Ruth was mean. She didn't act like a mother but like a cranky captain off a warship. Love and affection was a type of money in her house and she was stingy with it. Nice words and warmth had to be earned. Even when he became successful as a late-night TV host, people said she made fun of him. Could these reports be true? Did she hate her own son? When Johnny got his magic cards, he practiced his entertainment skills on family members with card tricks. He would follow them around and ask them to pick a card. Hethan decided to perform in front of people even though he was shy. His mother helped him and made him a cape for his first show in front of the local Kiwanis club. Eventually, he performed as the great Carson Sonny at age 14 and was paid $3 a show. Johnny realized something. The audience loved him. The warmth he felt was different from the pressure he felt from his mother. When his mother died in October 1985 at 84 years old, he didn't feel sad for her. Instead, what he told his friends was the wicked witch is dead. John refused to go to the funeral. But however, what happened next broke what he thought about his mom. In her home, Johnny found something. It turned out that inside her home, she kept a large box filled with newspaper clippings from his center career. Every article, every review, every time someone mentioned him. The woman who never showed him affection had been his biggest fan all along. Collecting proof of his success in secret, Johnny took that box and kept it in his bedroom closet for the rest of his life. Did he feel bad for not going to his mom's funeral? Could he have forgiven her for his childhood at that moment? Living in that kind of messed up home destroyed Johnny's view of people. He would rather avoid them than make games of talking and get yelled at. But deep inside, Johnny wanted to be loved. He enjoyed the attention he got from doing card tricks for people. He decided he wanted to be a magician. Some reports say his mother meanly told him not to. These reports may not be true because Ash secretly kept the large box we talked about before that had clippings of articles about his progress. Or did she tell him not to first and change her mind later? Or maybe she didn't want him to be a magician and was fine with everything else. While he was in the United States Navy, he learned something about himself. He could actually do it. In the Navy, Johnny showed he could fight and win during physical combat. He was an amateur boxer in the Navy. And out of his 16 fights, he only lost one. So, a Secretary of the Navy James V. Forrestal asked him if he wanted to stay in the Navy. But Johnny said no and told him he wanted to be a magician instead. Forrestal must have been shocked. So, he asked that Johnny do a trick for him. But John didn't just wish to become a magician, he had the skills for it. Johnny was able to amuse and entertain Forrestal. From that experience, Johnny realized that if he could entertain and amuse Somion as grumpy and important as Forrestal, he could entertain anyone. Then he made a decision. He wasn't going to be a magician anymore. He was going to be a comedy writer. To do this, when he went to the University of Nebraska in 1946, he studied journalism. Writing comedy would allow him to entertain without really talking to people. However, a few months into his program, Johnny switched courses to speech and drama. Why the change of heart? Johnny didn't want to write comedy anymore. He decided he was going to be a radio performer instead. There was a reason for this too. Johnny had begun to do magic tricks for money. He made about $25 per show, and he wanted a career that would give him a feeling close to that. Being a radio performer seemed like the best choice. By 1949. He was done with college. Booth wouldn't become a radio performer, however. His college training got him ready for what he would eventually be, a TV host. And after failing and not giving up, Johnny finally got his show on NBC in 1962. Why would a shy and quiet person choose to be a late-night TV host? Remember his weird understanding of love since he got the love and warmth he wished he got as a child from audiences. Johnny was hooked. But there was a problem. He was unable or didn't want to try getting that love from women he married. He didn't even look for it from his 3 sons from his first marriage. Just like his mother did to him, Johnny treated his sons with a cool, distant coldness. How sad, Johnny became the very thing he hated. However, it wasn't that he didn't care about them. They are even some of the reasons Johnny doesn't want to be in the public eye. Stick around and see what we mean. There was another reason Johnny chose to be a TV host. The format of The Tonight Show allowed Johnny to have the fake idea of talking to people. The show became his therapy, a way to escape the bad memories of his childhood. The talk show was in a controlled place. The interactions were written down and the endings were easy to predict. Johnny simply wanted to eat his cake and have it to be with people while not really being with them. However, even with this, Johnny planned to leave everything behind when the time was right. The show stopped being therapy as his fame grew, and that fame got in the way of the quietness off camera that Johnny wanted. That fame even cost him everything. And you'll soon see on the set of his show. He didn't mind the cameras, but off it he wanted total privacy, which fans wouldn't give him. However, it seemed like everything he did was because of his childhood, which was like the blueprint for everything that happened in his adult life. That childhood really wasn't one he would like to remember. Also, it wasn't the only reason Johnny lived his final years alone. Johnny was sick, but this part of him was something he wanted to keep from the world. In September 2002, 2 years before he died, Johnny's representative kept saying he was in good health. Even Johnny himself told CBS News that he was fine when tabloids kept saying he wasn't. But Johnny wasn't fine, and he was the one that caused his sickness himself. Let us explain. While it wasn't clear when Johnny started to smoke, one thing was clear. Johnny loved to smoke. Or did he? In the 1960s, Johnny smoked everywhere, even on live TV. At the time, it was allowed, and Johnny took full advantage of it, or maybe used it too much. Johnny was a chain smoker, and NBC files showed the shocking numbers. Johnny likely smoked 40 to 60 cigarettes every single day. That's 3 full packs during stressful recording days. Between jokes and commercial breaks, Johnny's lungs were getting destroyed in real time while millions of Americans watched him make it look cool. But here's what they didn't see. Johnny's chest coughs weren't going away. Doctors warned him about the cough, but Johnny didn't stop smoking. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He couldn't. He was addicted and was too ashamed to admit it. He even secretly told loved ones that the cigarettes were killing him. Yet, he kept puffing on cigarettes all day when he had the chance. With each cigarette he smoked, he felt guilty. And he admitted in the late 1970s that Household have gotten help. If he did, maybe he would still be alive now. Johnny's lungs began to have holes and became unable to take in oxygen the way they're supposed to. Still, he kept smoking and kept performing while his body was screaming for help. Why would someone so smart ignore such obvious danger? Johnny's lung capacity continued to go down, and at some point it was 60%. Working became more difficult for him. Crowded rooms became hard to breathe in for him, and the king of jokes and fast responses began to gasp for breath after being in a crowd. But it wasn't just crowded rooms that gave him problems. Stairs became his enemies and elevators felt like they were choking him. Something was deeply wrong. And then in 1991, that danger could no longer be ignored. Johnny's cough and that constant shortness of breath wasn't normal. In 1991, doctors told him he had emphysema. Could this diagnosis be why Johnny chose to retire from NBC in 1992? People felt that his retirement was shocking and that Johnny still had much to give. But did he? Now it made perfect sense. Johnny was escaping before his body gave out on national TV, before America watched him gasp for air between punchlines. The emphysema forced him to choose between retiring with dignity or public embarrassment by coking. Johnny hated to be seen gasping for breath. It could be part of the reason he even avoided those Hollywood parties. He didn't want to be in a crowd and let them see him react badly. So, retirement sounded great. Unfortunately, it was too late. By 1993, walking 100 yards made his shortness of breath so bad he'd have to stop and rest. His lung capacity continued to go down, and it reached around 35 to 40 by 2004. Most people at that level need extra oxygen just to sit up straight. But Johnny, reports said they refused extra oxygen. Some even said he kept on smoking. What was Johnny thinking? He even had a terrible thing happen that should have made him stop smoking in 1995. But Johnny kept going, likely because of his addiction and because he didn't like to be seen as weak. Could this be another bad response to the kind of childhood he had? So, despite his failing health, Johnny kept acting like was fine. But between 1999 and 2002, he was in the hospital for heart attacks and pneumonia problems, and it got worse. By 2004, Johnny needed 24/7 oxygen therapy. That means constant tubes in his nose, constant awareness of his death coming, constant limits on every movement, every activity, every moment. Johnny, who kept on saying he wasn't sick, admitted that he was on borrowed time. And on January 23, 2005, that time was up. He died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles because he couldn't breathe arising from emphysema. The smoking he loved to had definitely killed him. However, it could be that Johnny was no longer interested in living long before then and just wanted the disease to kill him. Maybe this was why he didn't use oxygen when it could have helped him. Johnny had lost so many people in his life. Those losses may have made living seem like a chore to him rather than something he would enjoy. When Johnny married his colleague sweetheart, Joan Wolcott, in 1949, life couldn't be better. They had 3 sons together, Christopher, Rick, and Corey. And then fame arrived. But fame came with something else: destruction. After 14 years, the marriage fell apart. The reason, Johnny confessed, he cheated on his wife and was obsessed with his work. But here's the sadder part. The divorce didn't just end a marriage. It created a wide gap between Johnny and his sons. A gap Johnny didn't fix, because just as his first marriage ended, Johnny married Joanne Copeland, a stunning model. He didn't try to learn from the mistakes he made in his first marriage. Maybe if he had, his marriage to Joanne wouldn't have ended after 9 years. Joanne accused Johnny of emotional neglect and workaholism. Their divorce was public and it cost him $500,000. It was a big fee, but wait till you see what his next marriage cost him. The $500,000 was a lot, but the emotional toll it took on Johnny was much more. However, the emotional cost of his next marriage was much worse. John married Joanna Holland in 1972, and their marriage lasted around 13 years. It was a miracle that the marriage lasted that long. Those 13 years weren't peaceful. Joanna was a socialite whose high society lifestyle clashed so badly with Johnny, who wanted to stay indoors when their marriage ended. It nearly made Johnny broke both with money and emotionally. Him and Joanna battled over a $20 million settlement. And in 1985, Johnny Carson had lost over $20.5 million to divorce settlements. Still, Johnny married again, but this time had learned that he wasn't built for chaos. So he kept things simple, and in 1987 he married a woman who was reprobate, the complete opposite of his previous wives. She was also 26 years younger than him. He didn't exactly learn to. He would read or play tennis rather than talk to her. Maybe he wanted to but couldn't because in 1991 everything changed. That incident drove Johnny deeper into himself. On June 21, 1991 in Cayucos, California, Rick Carson seemed to have driven off the cliff on a narrow road. His death shattered Johnny, who carried the guilt of not being close to his sons. For weeks, Johnny mourned, and he never got over Rick's death. Unfortunately, the losses weren't over just yet. In 1995, Christopher, Johnny's eldest son, died at 45 years old from lung cancer because he, like his dad, was also a heavy smoker. How do you process that? How do you wake up every day knowing you showed the behavior that killed your child? What's worse? Johnny and his last son were so distant that they rarely spoke. A lifetime of fame that brought everything except the one thing he needed: real human connection. Johnny always complained about the point of everything he had when he outlived 2 of his sons. What's the point of all this? He would ask those close to him. Really, what was the point?